Welcome to Bicycle Retail Radio, the bicycle industry podcast that brings retailers, vendors, advocates, and thought leaders to the mic for honest discussions about the latest issues facing retailers while taking an in-depth look at the person within the profession.
Welcome. This is NBDA President Heather Mason. This is the NBDA News Hour, co-hosted with our friends from Human Powered Solutions. Today, I am joined by Chad Picard, NBDA board member, P2 moderator. Welcome, Chad.
Good afternoon.
All right. Yeah. So today we are joined by micromobility experts Jay Townley, Fred Clements, Steve Bina, and Mike Fritz. Always a pleasure to have the team with us.
Yeah, the team at Human Powered Solutions has over 245 years of experience. Considered the data wizards. Their monthly newsletter, the Micromobility Reporter, is a dynamic resource for the industry featuring timely news and in-depth analysis about the latest in human-powered transportation, including bicycles, e-bicycles, e-scooters, and rideshare. Included is a focus on supply chain issues, technology, and both business and consumer trends that drive the marketplace.
I absolutely love our monthly news feature. We focus on the articles contained within this report. We want to give you a more in-depth view and a first-hand seat with the experts. We get a little opportunity to be investigative journalists, if you would. If you want to sign up to receive this email version of this resource, you can go to humanpoweredsolutions.com and you can sign up there. So let's dive in, Chad.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi there.
Lots to get into today. The title of the November newsletter is The Eye of the Hurricane. I think this has to do with the turbulent times of the industry over October. Jay, Mike, Steve, Fred, what do we need to know?
Well, I think that we used like 9 pages to just, or 10 pages just to go through the detail from October. But from my standpoint, I think the first thing that we need to get across is that, just as you said, Chad, these are turbulent times. And there are some issues in the economy that have moved up and down. But as we do this recording, this is Thanksgiving week. So the year is pretty well done and decided. And so we're going to have to be very mindful that we're moving into the slow season, if you will, for the industry, which is Q1 of next year. And the interest rate issues have not quite peaked yet. And we've got some other issues that we point out on the newsletter that are welling up that we're going to have to look at and examine and watch carefully as the industry moves into the Thanksgiving Christmas period. Fred, Mike, Steve, any comments?
I guess I don't have a lot to add on that one, Jay. The hurricane word was your choice. I'm only the editor. I'm not the writer. So, but I would agree that we're really. It's still, I think, a lot of the post-COVID shakeout, inventory nightmares. That's sort of the eye of the hurricane, I think, and then hoping for. Continued strong consumer demand that really did not occur to help clear out that inventory. And now we're just seeing massive price cuts and sales and people just trying to stay alive. And it's troubling time.
From my perspective, there's a lot of turbulence in the industry right now relative to regulation and certification that we're working to clarify and understand and hopefully clear up for a lot of our listeners as it relates to the issues that originated in New York City with battery fires. That's resulted in a lot of activity by key regulatory agencies. Local laws have been passed affecting the sale and distribution of electric bikes in particular. There's a lot going on there, and we can talk about that a little bit more further into the webinar.
Yeah.
And Jay, you touched on interest rates. You're right. We may not have seen the peak, but I doubt they'll go much higher. But the more important piece of this is if and when the interest rates start coming down. And that, frankly, I don't see happening for a while.
Yeah, lots to get into today. And, Jay, you hit it on the head with it's Thanksgiving week as we're recording. We're coming towards the end of the year. And I feel like every week there's been something happening that we've been, addressing either from the advocacy side, cash flow side, business basics for retailers. The article from Bloomberg, America has a bankruptcy problem. That one hit me hard. I'm really worried about retailers and suppliers. Genuinely concerned. How's that forecast look?
Well, it's not much better from the standpoint of bankruptcies. Bankruptcies are moving up. They're almost at all-time levels. As Steve pointed out, the biggest factor here is interest rates, which have continued to creep up. Now, there is some feeling that we've reached peak from the standpoint of interest rates, but that doesn't mean they're going down. They're as high as they've ever been. I think the highest in a decade. And so it means that the era of low cost money to finance a business is gone. And so if a retailer, wholesaler, brand was able to finance inventory at the beginning of the year and then had to go in and refinance it as we get into the end of this year, they're going to pay more for the cost of interest, more for the money. And what's happening in this country is, first of all, bankruptcies are up. We're also seeing the ramifications of these larger corporations and companies. And we just saw one in the bicycle industry, Cigna, which is European owned with a Swiss financier behind it. And the Europeans for the last 3 weeks have talked about their whole empire, the Cigna empire, crumbling. Well, what's happened here is a very large corporation did not get refinanced. The money was not forthcoming. And so the end result was this dissolving of a company. And it started with the fact that they were listed on the New York Exchange, the stock exchange, and they delisted. And immediately after delisting, then you had all of the American entities and all of those brands move toward Chapter 11. And now the European side of that business is starting to also pull in, collapse, doing what their version of Chapter 11 is, which is insolvency. We competed in the IBD with a couple of their brands. They were big direct sellers. Wiggle is one of the brands involved. And then there's many others as you look at this large corporation, a conglomerate, multi-billion-dollar conglomerate is slowly fading, or as the Europeans said, crumbling under the weight of bankruptcy because of the financial problems they ran into. So at this point, there is not much else that can be done. Companies will seek Chapter 11 protection from creditors as the cash flow gets to the point where they can no longer pay what's owed. They cannot pay creditors. So at this point, we may be at peak interest rate, but we have not crested yet. We'll go into the winter and into the first quarter of 2024 and really have all of the financial pressure, the inventory pressure still on the industry. It boils down, Heather, as we've said a couple of times, you and I've talked about this, and also Fred and I have chatted about it, is cash flow. And I'm sure that Steve and Chad and Mike would agree. The issue here for the American businesses in our channel of trade is making sure that they've got cash flow. I would say, if anything, Steve, it's cash flow is king.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right, Jay. And I'll address that a little later on, but cash flow truly is the lifeblood of any business.
Anybody else have anything to add on that topic?
Really.
I saw the article as well on business bankruptcies, and it certainly is a challenging time. What about the article from Outsourcing Journal related to retailers needing promotions to survive picky consumers and weak sales? I feel like we're seeing this in the bicycle industry right now with promotion after promotion. Retailers have to be very careful. Any guidance?
Well, I don't know about guidance as much as comment. Certainly, and the rest of the team can jump in here. The situation that article was covering is one that's across the board, certainly fits into what we do at the specialty bicycle retail side of the business, as well as all of the retail trades, including the online people. To your point, Chad, over the weekend, I simply, for all of the monitoring I do, all of the websites that I get and that I look at and monitor the pricing, I had fully 14 of them on Saturday and Sunday by count. And these are 14 different brands, all of which had adverts they were sending to me. And they went everywhere from 85% off, 50% off, 40% off, and then some at specific dollars off, $600 on every model. One of the brands was $1,200 again off of every model in their line. This is an online seller. So it's brick and mortar, it's online, it's omni-channel. I only found one that was really smart, and that was a website where you had to go to this. They didn't upfront say Black Friday sale or 85% off. They listed all of the different things you could go to the website and click through to, and one was sale. And once you got to the sale, then they had deep discounts on everything. Just a huge bunch of their products that were available, but they were not pounding it up front. That was 1 out of 14, and I didn't get everybody. These were just the people that I decided to count on Saturday and Sunday. So to the point of what National Retail Federation found is price is right now what the American consumer is looking at, and that will be their deciding factor. The price of a product they want to buy today will decide whether they stay with the brands they like or go to somebody else, probably with a lower price. Brand loyalty has dropped. The bottom has dropped out of it. I don't know how it is for the wealthy and the higher income, because the numbers that were in the National Retail Federation article that we republished were all going to the issue of the average consumer. And the fact is that we've had probably a double-digit increase over the last quarter in those consumers making a decision that they will go for the lower price and will abandon brands that they have been loyal to for, in some cases, decades, in order to get a lower price from another brand that's being offered. In some cases, that's moving from brick and mortar to online. So it's very much a price market, as indicated by, it looks like at this point, everybody has got a sale.
Yeah, I've seen a couple retailers with their so-called Black Friday promotions. I think some started in mid-October, and it's going to go through Christmas. They're using any little marketing hook to get people and to try to drive, as you say, cash flow. And so it's not, the hurricane's not just in the bike industry. I think there's a hurricane around the world, actually.
I want to dive into Vosper's article, if you don't mind. Half of the U.S. bike shops don't carry any of the 4 big brands. I have thoughts on this article, but I want to start with Fred. Fred, what do you think about this article?
I thought it was interesting that the number, he made a big, in fact, that was the focus of the article, that his, a brand needs a count of dealers, and that half of the dealers don't carry any of the so-called big 4. And that makes sense. And it's one of many key indicators, I think, for a brand. But I would guess that the big 4 still probably have an 80% market share among IBDs. So I wouldn't, in a way, we're not seeing the whole picture. Between Trek Specialized, Giant, and the Pond Group, there's a lot of volume. So I think it's encouraging to discover that a lot of storefronts are making it with smaller brands that maybe and I've known a lot in my time where they've intentionally made the move away from the big guys because they're less focused on volume, course, it's a little more work to establish a brand in your community without a whole lot of national marketing support. Maybe these stores are typically a little smaller, but I think maybe it plays well towards the trend we're hearing about and seeing more of a move towards service and repair. And maybe the brand carried, a typical bike shop, still half of your floor space is bicycles. Maybe that's, as we go forward, smaller footprints and fewer bicycles on the floor is more sustainable. Bring in higher margin things such as service. That might be, this actually may be a pretty nice thing. It does seem to take more work though to balance multiple smaller brands. But if you can sort of curate the experience, including the brands you carry for the customer, and cherry pick between brands to give them what they want that maybe the big guys can't offer, seems like a good thing.
Hmm.
The other thing I noted, the other thing I noted in the article, Chad, and Fred might have noticed this too. It talks about nearly half at the headline, but if you dig into it, that's 45%. Now, I may be a stickler, but 45% is not nearly half. 49% is nearly half. So let's start with the fact that the reality is that what Christopher Georger found was 45% are the top four. And of course, they've shifted and changed. As the article shows brilliantly, we've got different proportions. But I also think you have to look carefully at something that Heather's pointed out to me several times, and then I went and counted it. I just said that I looked at 14 brands that I monitored Saturday and Sunday to look for the sale prices. One of those was Canyon, which is, as you all know, is a large direct seller. The other two are mainstream. They're two of the top four that we're talking about. So that's 3 out of 14. And the point I'm making here is that there are now many, many more brands in the market. Pre-2019, who in the group had heard of Aventon?
Right.
Who in the group had heard of Rad's Power Bikes? Who had heard of Juiced? Who had heard of Super 73? And I could go on.
Mm-hmm.
I went back. That goes back to, I guess, the point that I got out of Rick's article, which is yes, 45% are the top four, and they have shifted and changed position. But what's not shown in that article, what we don't show as an industry, what I think we have to dig into is that there could be another 10 to 12 brands that were never in the market in 2019, or certainly were not in the market to the point where we paid any attention to them. So I think we're dealing with a larger market that's spread out. The base has spread. And so we don't have, I think Mark Sani said this well, this is not your father's bike business. And so I think that's part of what's going on here as well. I think the market has changed.
Yeah. I've been watching the market flood with these other brands, and then there's the recent news of like Denago imploding. I see Eddie Merckx Cycles is going to be relaunched in January 2024. I mean, it's just a very dynamic, ever-changing landscape. Lots of investment from other industries. I mean, we saw Serial One come into the marketplace, not quite sure where they are now. It just a lot is changing. We'll have to keep a really close eye on it. I can't really ask anyone on this call, I guess, to predict the future, but I do know that there's lots of brands now. And from what I've heard from our retailers and our P2 group meetings, customers are not coming in as much saying they want brand ABC or even a top 4 brand. It's a much different landscape. So we're going to have to, as a collective whole, the entire industry, keep an eye on that. Chad, I think you were mentioning that article from the Chain Store Age, right, on brand loyalty.
Yeah, there's a survey done with consumers that recently pointed out that consumers are looking to save money and perhaps brand loyalty is declining. Jay, Mike, Fred, what can we learn from this? We talked a little bit about it earlier, but anything more to add?
Well, I think that goes to the brand loyalty within the channel, and also a danger One is, I think that the bulk of consumers at this point in America are loyal to the best price they can get. I think inflation has done that to us, that we're going to go to house brands. We're going to go to private label. We're moving down market from the standpoint of the bulk of the movement. As I say, I can't account for very rich people, but the bulk of the folks that we're looking at to spend money on consumer goods, I think that's part and parcel of what we're dealing with. And I also think that online, direct to consumer, D2C, omni-channel in the case of what retailers are able to do to take a website, make it commerce enabled, is spreading the business out. And the brands that have cropped up are becoming attractive to a different audience that we've had in the bike business. And so that's the danger. I think that we will keep servicing the enthusiasts and the hobbyists, but I'm afraid that that is a shrinking piece of the market. It's like baby boomers. You know, it's declining. We're dealing with demographics, the slow march of demographics. And the younger consumer and women who have been condescended by and to in bike shops, who don't want to go to bike shops, are finding that it's much easier to deal with an online merchant. It's much more rewarding to buy a bicycle or an e-bike from somebody that doesn't talk down to them. So, as I said, I think that's the danger here. But all in all, brand loyalty is not what it used to be.
If I were one of the big four, I'd be a little concerned. My sense is, and I don't have the numbers here, so I'll be brief because I might be totally off base. I doubt that the big four, any of them, are top four in e-bike sales. This is our growth category, and the big brands in our industry, I don't believe, are dominating like they do in human-powered only bicycles. And so that's a little bit of a dynamic that I find pretty interesting. Rarely do I see one of our big four e-bikes out there on the roads.
Yeah, I would say that I think your train of thought is spot on there, Fred, from what we've heard from retailers. Gosh, there was an article on customers returning items, and I actually had saw this myself, and I don't know, something I was reading. It feels like consumer shopping habits are shifting, and I feel like if other companies are looking at the return policies and noticing that they have to be more stringent on some protocols, that maybe as bicycle retailers, we want to keep an eye on this as well. I know it's not like it has been in the past where you can just purchase things, bring them to your house, try them on, whatever, and then return penalty free. Some retailers are really locking that down. Fred, you know, thinking about guidance to bicycle retailers, what do you think about this return policy change?
Well, if the online sellers that have been extremely generous in their return policies are forced by cost to tighten those policies, it may help the IBD compete a little bit. You know, the return policy is part of the overall equation as to why you buy with a merchant. And my sense is a fair number of people go to Amazon because they could abuse the return policy. Only Amazon offers it freely, so it's really not abuse. But I think, you know, what occurred to me is something Mike Jakubowski of Chain Reaction Bicycles told me years ago. You know, when I have a return, I look in the mirror. Where did I fail that customer? Because if I'm really listening and really trying to understand their needs and doing more than just trying to make a transaction, return should be minimal because I matched them up with the right product and at the right time, and I met their need fully. And again, quoting another guy, Chris Cagle, used to say, well, I'm not in the bicycle business, I'm in the relationship business. And so the more you move from just raw transaction to relationships, and the more I think you're going to be able to address returns in a way that's meaningful to the customer. I would be upfront, though, about what your policy is, you know, without, you know, trying to couch it, without trying to say no or try to be harsh to the customer and sort of deter their excitement about buying something. But I kind of like that you know, that you return when you must. Not all customers are created equal. Obviously, some are just there to get a deal and to make a transaction. But for those that I think you have a relationship, I don't believe anyone says your return policy has to be universally enforced. And if someone that you know and care about and you have a strong relationship with and is a regular customer made a buying mistake, yeah, first look at yourself. How did I miss? But I think, generosity is still a pretty good principle, and you may have to eat a sale one time and gain more to come. So it's a complicated and difficult area. It's always been difficult since I started for retailers, because typically a smaller store just can't compete in that, with these generous return policies. And maybe things are evolving where they don't have to quite as much.
Yeah. Yeah. I always think, and this is early December that this podcast will air, and it's a great time as a retailer to review your return policy with your staff, especially as you have customers coming in, possibly looking for gift items. So making sure your staff has all the answers readily available about what your policy is always a good idea. Steve, always thrilled to have you on the podcast with us. And you wrote a great article I really found very enjoyable, planning the year ahead. In this article, you speak about dialing in your business plan and budget. You talk about inflation, interest rates, supply chain, and minimum wage. I would love if you could just give our listeners just an overview maybe of where you're at with your suggestions and some of the key points in the article.
Thank you, Heather. I got to turn my microphone back on. Always enjoy being here and sharing with the group and your membership. Hopefully by this point, since we are 11 months into the year, the majority of your membership has sat down and started working through their business plans for next year. If nothing else, taking a look at what's happened this year and how they want to modify perhaps what they're planning to do next year. We've touched on inflation. That's moderated pretty well, although what we're seeing now in the marketplace and in supply chains are things starting to catch up, right? Inflation on a day-to-day basis is down. The last number I saw was 3.2%. And so that isn't as big of an issue as it was. In terms of interest rates, we touched on that a few minutes ago. I'm not sure they've peaked. There may be another quarter point or half point, depending upon what might happen with inflation. But I think the bigger issue that your membership's going to have to deal with is the fact that I just don't see, and I don't think they will either, interest rates coming back down as rapidly as they went up. And that's going to have a continuing impact on cash flow. And as we mentioned a minute ago, that also is a very important part of how you run your business. We've been talking here back and forth about the sales that are going on and the discounting that we see. Jay and I have had some conversation back and forth, and frankly, I see a lot of that as dealers trying to generate some cash flow, because right now it's easier for them to give up margin and to give up some dollars to not have to continue paying the financing charges for carrying all of that inventory. Another thing that most of your dealers haven't had to face is minimum wage issues. I was just doing some checking before we started here. Fast food workers in the state of California, come April 1st, their minimum wage is going to be $20 an hour. In many states, we've seen $15 an hour. Now, to many of your membership, that may not be a real issue, but the thing to be mindful of is the pressure that it's going to put on your dealers to continue to pay well and to continue to keep the employees that they have satisfied, because we've seen all of these double-digit pay raises that have been negotiated over the last 4 or 5 months, and that's setting expectations. Even though it's not a lump sum right now, it's setting expectations on what wages and salaries should be, even for small businesses. And that's something they're just going to have to plan for over the next 12 months.
Steve, to push you a little bit more for our retailers that are listening, how important is looking at cash flow? And I guess second part, do you think we should be forecasting growth for 2024 or maybe something else?
Yeah, again, I can't tell you how important cash flow is. It's okay to have negative cash flow over a certain period of time if there's light at the end of that tunnel and you've got the equity to be able to support it. But if you've got negative cash flow over a prolonged period of time, you're out of business. So you've got to make sure that at some point, whatever you're doing in your business is going to generate a positive cash flow. It's essential. In terms of forecasting growth for 2024, to me, that's a double-edged question. There's two parts to that. Are you going to sell more product than you sold this year? Well, depends. Is the product plans that you have the way you're going to be? Are you going to be moving into new segments? Are you going to be pushing more e-bikes? Those types of things. So in terms of growth, you may be forecasting more dollars and not necessarily more product. And again, that comes back then to how are you going to build your business plan? Do you need to be open as many hours as you've been? Do you need to have as many employees? If you're not selling as much product, but you're generating more dollars, are you going to be strictly walk in the door sales, or are you going to expand into direct to consumer? So there are a number of different things that play into that. I would certainly, if I were a retailer, be forecasting an increase in sales dollars, but I'd have to have a good hard plan as to how I'm going to do that.
It's very insightful, Steve. I'm watching retailers navigate this landscape in so many different ways. We have retailers with multiple doors, maybe even closing a location. We have product mix changes, as you pointed out. A lot of retailers are looking at their cash flow, looking at their budgets, and if they look at their cash flow, they're even looking at a way, what if our sales do decline? What could we do? What could we cut back? So those answers are right there if they need those.
Well, and the critical part to that, Heather, is you can't create a business plan, put it on the shelf and say, okay, we're good. If you're not looking at that at least quarterly and maybe even monthly and making adjustments along the way, if you're not hitting that plan, the end result is not good.
Yeah, definitely something that we're advising all retailers to keep a strong eye on. And if you're listening to this, definitely head over to the Human Powered Solutions website and read the article that Steve has wrote. It's really a wealth of information. Steve, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. I'm just going to flip it over. Jay, lots of talk around cyclist safety. We're talking e-bikes. We're talking e-scooters. We're not just talking the batteries, but we're talking about reducing injury and risk. There's a lot of bicyclists running into pedestrians, whatnot. There's just a lot of people on multi-use trails that we're having a hard time navigating the speed and the power of the e-bikes, e-scooters. There's a coalition that's been formed, the C4CS, Coalition for Cyclist Safety. For our listeners who haven't heard of that, Jay, do you want to catch us up on that?
Sure. First of all, I think you're absolutely correct about safety, which is now, over the past couple of months, it's become clear that safety, capital letters, is a extremely important motivator to consumers and to riders. There's data that I think, Heather, you're going to be looking at the NBDA relative to the consumer marketplace. That's even more important because some of the feedback that I'm seeing indicates that the problems of vehicles and vehicular death associated with both pedestrians and cyclists are becoming major issues in the market as far as the way people are thinking. The last time I looked, there were at least 5 major initiatives rearing up over the last 45 days in the safety arena for cyclists. And it's not just lithium-ion batteries, which Mike has got spent a lot of time with. He's got a lot of information and expertise in that area. But he and I both have looked very carefully at what the new coalition for cyclist safety is doing, and they were just announced over the last month. The cycling director for Bosch gave an interview to Bike Europe and disclosed that there are 19 entities that have joined together from the automotive and the bicycle businesses to have a new initiative or start a new initiative in the United States. And it's called the Coalition for Cycling Safety. The thing that I found extremely interesting about that is it is an American initiative. This is not for Europe. This is for America. And the reason that was given for that, I think, is also equally interesting, and that is that DOT, the U.S. Department of Transportation, has come out with several responses, several papers, several initiatives relative to this rising number of injuries and fatalities out in the roadways associated with pedestrians and cyclists. And it is an alarmingly large number. The point is that DOT is pushing on the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA. And so that becomes a whole new arena. We've spent a huge amount of time, as you're well aware, Heather and Chad, with what Michael is spending his time on, and that is the United States Consumer Product Safety Commission, and what they're going to do to regulate the consumer product known as the e-bike, and lithium-ion are part of that construct. But now this is another whole new initiative through the U.S. Department of Transportation and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And there are several branches of that go to the safety of cyclists along with the safety of pedestrians. There is added to that something that Fred and I spent a lot of time talking about. We've got some old friends and associates in the bicycle business, but there are at this point there's a lot of pushback on these younger people riding electric bicycles on bike paths and bikeways, and also controversy that Mike is dealing with, and you are to an extent too, Heather, over in the electric bike side, and that's the out of class product. I just quickly saw a new stat from People for Bikes that showed that the largest class, according to their use classes of product, e-bike product that's selling in the marketplace, are class 3. Class 3 have a max speed of 28 miles an hour. They are not recognized as a product under the consumer product safety definition of a bicycle. And so that goes to the complaints out in the marketplace where the advocates, the folks that have been long time safe cycling instructors are complaining bitterly about the lack of safety, knowledge, information about these young people riding these e-bikes on bikeways, sidewalks, and streets. And part of this is education. Certainly part of it is regulation. But it also means that we've got a different marketplace. We've talked about it earlier in the podcast. A different market, a different consumer, and we definitely have different products. And we still, as Michael has pointed out, we still are working on regulating them. So the bike industry has in front of us a very, very interesting period of time that's going to take us through 2025. And it's going to involve mandatory regulation development. It's going to involve state use regulation. It's going to involve municipalities dealing with what they view as unsafe bicycle riding. And it definitely is going to involve, because the automotive industry is now getting in bed with the whole of the bike business to deal with safety, this new coalition for cyclist safety that deals with, and now Audi USA, by the way, is one of the big movers and shakers in this group. Audi is Volkswagen. And then, of course, Bosch is primarily in the automotive business. So there'll be large entities involved. And Michael also has been talking to the folks in one of the 3 sponsoring groups at this point that have come forward and is developing the ability of automobiles to recognize cyclists on the road, cyclists to recognize automobiles on the road. And this goes beyond the devices that are in the commercial market today, but to make everything safer from the standpoint of cycling and the cycling interface in the community. So this is going to be multi-level. It's going to be complex. And it's I think, probably the big issue for the American bicycle business going forward, under the heading of all caps, safety.
Interesting. Thank you, Jay.
Mike, let's get you into the conversation. I see the CPSC article from October 17th. It's reporting that 2022 injuries have increased 21%. I know you guys were at the Shift event in Bentonville. How is the current landscape looking around e-bike safety and regulation?
Well, you're probably aware, Chad, that a commissioner, Mary Boyle from the Consumer Product Safety Commission, was at the Shift event, and she publicly announced that CPSC has committed to promulgating a new updated bicycle safety standard. Right now, the calendar is such that a draft will be available for comments sometime in 2024, in all likelihood toward the end of the year. And that the new standard will be promulgated and made the law of the land sometime in 2025. Again, it's a pretty generic calendar at this point. We'll learn more moving forward. There's a lot of discussion about where that standard will come from. We do not believe that CPSC will undertake the development of a standard on their own, as they did back in the 70s, when they enlisted the help of the National Bureau of Standards to draft a regulation that ultimately heavily involved the industry. And Jay and I both sat on the committees that helped refine that into a workable standard. We do not expect they'll do that again. We anticipate that they'll probably take some of the work that's already been done relative to safety standards for bicycles. There's a number of European standards. We do not think that a U.S. governmental agency will adopt a European standard. The standard that most likely will come to the forefront currently is a standard that's been under development by the International Standards Organization and the American National Standards Organization, which is called 4210. Unlike UL 2849, it addresses every aspect of a bicycle, and mechanical as well as electrical. UL 2849 only addresses the electrical system and the battery pack. So the expectation is that the 4210 is going to be the likely contender, if you will, to ultimately become the mandatory safety standard promulgated by CPSC. So, and that, we were talking earlier about turbulence in the industry. A lot of the work that I've been doing lately is basically trying to clarify the situation relative to standards and regulatory compliance and certification and whatnot. The whole industry has taken notice of what's transpired. The fire situation in New York acted as a catalyst, if you will, to focus on the importance of product safety standards. And UL obviously has played a very critical role in that, as they have promulgated standards associated with lithium-ion batteries and an e-bike's electrical system. The UL 2849 has been mandated by the city of New York. No electric bicycle may be sold in the city of New York unless it's been certified to comply with UL 2849. But now there's a lot of questions as to what is certified and what does comply mean. Who's authorized to do that? What certifications are acceptable from the city of New York relative to the agencies that do the testing to these various standards? So there's a tremendous amount of confusion. There's a tremendous amount of concern relative to this. We know all of the brands, as I say, have taken notice. They're all looking at what they need to do to make sure that they can develop and distribute compliant product. But then the whole situation with the inventory concerns in the industry right now is coming into play. If our suppliers start making UL compliant product tomorrow, it won't see the marketplace probably for a year or 18 months until they can blow out the inventory that doesn't currently have certification. So there's a lot of hand wringing associated with that. How do we deal with that, et cetera, et cetera? And then, as I say, there's questions about whose certifications count. New York was considering a regulation that says that you must have certification from what they call a NRDL. NRDL stands for Nationally Recognized Testing Laboratories. Not all of the testing laboratories that hold themselves out as being competent to test and certify products are nationally recognized testing laboratories. So whose certification counts and whose doesn't? And so it's a very complex situation. We're working hard to try to clarify it. I've just in this last week, I've been involved in extensive conversations with representatives from Underwriters Labs, representatives from SGS, which is the big multinational testing laboratory, trying to figure out exactly what advice can we give to retailers relative to this whole situation. So it's it's a mess right now, and as I say, we've kind of taken it upon ourselves to try to do the best that we can to clarify the situation so that retailers have an in-depth understanding and can take action that's appropriate and in the long-term interest of their business as this whole situation develops. So, but at the same time, we're also working really hard. There's a extensive research going on right now. I mean, I usually talk about lithium-ion battery fires. There is a ton of stuff going on right now, analyzing the whys and wherefores of lithium-ion battery failures. What are the dangers? What are the hazards? We're learning more about that. And that's consistent with another initiative that's going on. I recently joined the UL Technical Committee 1487, which is dealing with battery charging and containment, battery storage and charging containment. Ultimately, we anticipate that products will be available, storage cabinets will be available to retailers that will allow them to safely store and charge these lithium-ion batteries in their shops without concerns that a battery pack is going to catch fire and burn a shop down. But to understand how to develop a containment system that's effective, we have to know all of the attributes, if you will, of a lithium-ion battery fire. And there's a lot of work being undertaken in that regard as well. So there's there's just a million things happening right now in this space, and we're working hard to stay up to speed with respect to it.
Mike, we really appreciate the work you're doing in this space, and it is just evolving at such a rapid rate. It's great to see e-bikes continue to be on the rise. It's great to see that growing marketplace. It's stimulating some really good things. I'm keeping an eye on the tax credits and subsidies. I'm seeing where geographical areas have implemented these tax credits and subsidies. We're seeing retailers having people come in, take advantage of them. Electrek had a great article about the incentives available. I mean, I think you're probably hopefully all in agreement that this is a good thing for the industry. Are there any negatives that we're missing out on that we should?
There is a fly in that ointment, Heather, and that's that a lot of these municipalities that are looking to grant subsidies and tax breaks are now talking about only offering these benefits to people selling compliant bikes. In other words, if there's a tax break associated within your municipality, they may rule that for that bike to be eligible, it's got to be UL compliant. So everybody's going like, oh no, how we want to take advantage of that because we realize it could be a real boost to business. But back to the regulatory issues and the compliance and certification issues, it's a multifaceted issue that it's got a lot of people confused.
Yeah, we're gonna have to keep an eye on that. Anyone else? Jay, you have any thoughts about the tax credits?
Well, I agree with Mike. They are a good thing, by the way. Some of these tax credits and some of the subsidies equal the cost of an e-bike as we look at e-bike market today. I think it's pretty well determined that the $14,000-15,000 e-bike market is still there, but it's diminished in size. And that we're now looking at, in round numbers, $2,000 is probably the sweet spot, which has been a lowering of the price of e-bikes and the expectation. So some of the tax subsidies and some of the supplements that are available through the municipalities, through a city, are in that range, $1,700, $2,000. You can almost pay for the cost of an e-bike, and what they're willing to give as a tax break. So I think they're a good thing, but as Michael said, you have to be careful because the municipalities, while they will give the tax break or they'll give the subsidy, are now catching on to the idea that you need safer bikes, safer e-bikes, and that UL 2849 is in fact the way to do that because that's what the commission is recommending. They've seen New York do it as the largest municipality in the country, but they're not aware that the industry has an inventory problem. And so that we've got large inventories of product that are not UL 2849 certified. and that product has to be sold through into the market before we're going to get a whole population of UL 2849 certified product. So UL 2849 is not the problem. Part of the issues in the marketplace have to be dealt with, and there are ways to do that. I think a municipality that wants to give a subsidy could certainly do it, and put a time or a time limit on when the UL 2849 piece of the equation would come into compliance, when it would come into effect. So there's things we can do as an industry to try to help that along. I just think we have to be mindful. All in all, I would say that the subsidies are a good thing. If we in the industry are aware we're going to have to manage some of the process, and as Mike said, we're going to have to also as an industry work through, sort out, and get these regulatory and standards issues dealt with and come to an agreement as an industry how to move them forward in the best interest of the consumer.
All right, well, we're going to switch it up a little bit. Let's focus for a moment on Shimano. Seems like they are a leader, and I know as we look at a golden ticket or a magic ball, we see what's happening in their marketplace. I read they're down 25% in the first 3 quarters. Is this important information for the industry? What should we learn from this?
Well, I think that's important. And the rest of the team here can speak on this, but I think it's almost safe to say in our world, which is the bicycle business of our fathers, there was a saying, and as Shimano goes, so goes the bike industry. So the fortunes of a global player like Shimano, who got a very large market share, which at times has been estimated at 85% market share of componentry, of the OEM componentry that goes on a new bike. And Chad, you know this as a dealer, the amount of Shimano that's in the market. I walk through my Walmart on a regular basis looking at the bike display and look for the Shimano markings on the products, on the derailleurs, on the hubs. They're there. They're obviously all the way down into the mass merchant side of the business. So there is in their numbers a bit of a clue as to what's going on in the business. What we don't know is how much stuff, how much componentry, how much stuff's in inventory. We're back to this, inventory problem that the industry has got on multiple levels, because Shimano sells componentry, not complete bikes. So they're a little bit, their stuff, or their material, their equipment, their componentry will be in inventory at OEMs in China, Taiwan, Vietnam, in warehouses waiting to be built into complete bicycles, and create a different kind of problem than we've got in this country, which is primarily a finished goods problem, the complete bicycle. But nonetheless, that's what Shimano is suffering from. As a global player, yeah, we should be aware of what they're saying in their reports, because they do give us clues, insights into how's it going in the European market, how's it going in the Asian market, how's it going in the North American market, where are they up and down. Overall, though, at 25%, I think it gives us a general rule of thumb that this industry globally is about a quarter, 25% down from where it was the previous year. And then each market, as you saw in their quarterly report, has a different percentage to report. I've harped on this before, but one of the things that both the Shimano and the Giant reports, because they are public companies, give us a clue about is the importance of the Chinese consumer market, and the fact that all our multinationals, including Shimano, Giant, Trek, Specialized, and Pon, are all doing it, with Cannondale as the lead brand, are all doing a great deal of consumer business in China. And so there are 3 key markets that have to be looked at, and that you got to pull information out of that Shimano quarterly report. And oh, by the way, at this point, we're due for another set of quarterly reports from the public companies, from Giant and Shimano. So there's going to be another look at those percentages. And I think they are very important. They should be looked at, talked about more than they are in the industry.
Mm-hmm. We're going to definitely keep an eye on that. I think that's a great focus for like our last question to wrap up this newsletter. The newsletter was packed this month, so much information. You guys do a really tremendous job pulling together all these articles. I love how every article is boiled down, what it means for the retailers, what it means for the industry. I can't thank you guys enough for the work that you do. As always, every episode we end with specific advice for our listeners going into December 2023. Fred, I'll just kick it off with you like we always do. Overall focus for retailers this December?
In many ways, I'm a broken record, and I just repeat the same thing over and over again because it's important. In this case, I think the business planning side, this is the time of year to do it, given the unknowns. So I was thinking about business planning, and maybe I can offer something a little bit new. I would consider do two plans. Do one with a little hope built in, and do one, oh my gosh, 2024 is horrible and we're missing January, we're missing February. So just make an easy transition to a survival plan versus a normal plan. And that might take some of the pressure off of your thinking. If I really had to go to a draconian business plan, what would it look like? Well, to think about some of that ahead of time would seem to be, I'm not predicting this is going to happen. It's going to be a great 2024, probably, but it's not a bad idea to prepare for what if it's another lean year. And then the second point that popped into my head is, a lot of times the owner of a business tries to do it all themselves or with a small management team, say the manager, to try to sit down and do business planning. I think there's a tremendous value in a third party to come in, a fresh set of eyes. I'm reminded of the NBDA's Profitability Project program where you've got a bunch of retailers in the room. I think, just a different perspective in your planning. So you're not stuck in a closet, basically, trying to do it all on your own. To bring in, maybe if it's not in the bike business, someone or part of a program like the NBDA's, maybe it's another business person you have a relationship in another industry in town. But I think part of the planning makes good sense to have some input beyond just you. And so, but yeah, bottom line, this is the time of year to plan if you haven't already. And that would be my advice.
Excellent. Thank you.
Jay, where do you think our suppliers should be focused moving into 2024?
Well, first of all, I agree with Fred. They should reach out to a third party. Since Mike and I are in that business, that's a little bit of a commercial response. But along with that, what's going through my head, particularly after doing the newsletter for at this point 10 months, is tell the truth. I think that there's great value in being honest with your channel of trade. And you could tell the truth in a lot of different ways. And one of them, if you're very concerned about that being public information, is tell the truth at least to the people you're doing business with up and down your supply chain. Tell the truth to your suppliers, tell the same truth to your dealers. Because I think one of the things that we're seeing and laboring under here is, we mentioned Shimano and looking at their financial statements. But quite frankly, Chad, you have to work pretty hard to both understand that statement and get information about it, even though that's a public document. And there's only a couple of little glimmers of those public documents. And I think we'd be better off as an industry if at every industry conference, of every gathering, and particularly in reaching out to the news media, we simply told the truth about what the financial condition is, what the inventory situation is, and what are our plans. And as Fred said, if we got a high plan, a low plan, a middle plan, if we've got a great optimistic plan and also a plan for disaster, tell people that. Because I've got the feeling that the other shoe is going to drop here. And the idea that we're in the eye of a hurricane, that means that we've gone through a storm and now we're sitting in the middle with another storm to come. And the severity of that storm is, at this point, we don't know. We know it's going to be nasty. So again, I think that for the supply community, the more truthful we can be, the more we can share, the more we can make sure that we're communicating, the better off we're all going to be.
Jay, I couldn't agree with you more. And in January here, we'll have a retailer supplier best practice forum, an opportunity so we can have these discussions, these conversations, so we can get through whatever is coming at us in this new year. Mike, over to you. Focus for the industry in regard to e-bikes.
I think the best advice we can offer right now to retailers is don't panic. I think we're seeing something that happens regularly in society. I mean, that's the fact that technology is advancing so fast that in some respects, regulation can't keep up with it. And some of the technology that we've commercialized needs to be regulated. Obviously, this whole battery situation is a good case in point. The net result is once we get through the turmoil associated with understanding how to build our products so that they're safe for the consumers and safe for the retailers, it'll be a better day. We'll address these issues, and it's not just relative to the lithium-ion batteries, but as Jay alluded, and one thing we didn't talk a lot about is this Coalition for Cyclist Safety is promoting an emerging technology called V2X. V2X stands for Vehicle to Everything, and the whole idea is that bikes and cars of the future will be equipped with circuitry, the capabilities to what the V2X people that I'm talking to call a digital halo. In other words, it'll be a way for cyclists via this technology to communicate with cars in the neighborhood that they're there, where they're heading. It will elevate awareness of a cyclist in the transportation infrastructure, and that should go a long way to helping mitigate some of these issues. And as pickup trucks get bigger and blind spots get bigger, cyclists are more hazard, and we'll have these new technologies that will help us address that situation. So we're going to do a presentation during the upcoming CABDA NBDA shows talking about some of these new technologies, and there are several. But the point is technology is advancing at a rapid rate. Ultimately, it will benefit us all. It'll make our products more valuable. It will make e-bikes more valuable in the transportation infrastructure. It'll help the environment. It'll help our health. We'll get through this. But in the meantime, there's going to be a period of confusion and consternation relative to what we need to do in terms of making sure that the goods that we sell are safe for their intended purpose. So don't panic. Stay tuned for further details. We'll continue doing everything that we can to convey this information so that you understand where we're going and that there is, in fact, a light at the end of the tunnel.
Steve, what about for a financial perspective for retailers in December?
Well, Fred and Jay have both verbalized a great deal of what I believe is necessary. We've spoken about cash flow. Again, it's king. Know what your cash flow is, plan it accordingly. Put the business plan together. If you put together contingency plans for that, that's probably a good idea as well, because you really never know, which also says you need to be measuring yourself along the way to make sure that you're either hitting your targets, or if you're not hitting your targets, where that is causing a problem. And the other key piece to that is, if you have contingency plans, don't be afraid to put them in play. If you want to have a business running in 2025, you got to make sure you get through 2024.
Awesome. This conversation always goes so quickly. There's so much here. And, for our listeners, we've barely touched on the surface of the Micromobility Reporter. So definitely go sign up to receive that. Chad, thanks for being here to co-host and asking some great questions today of our guests.
Yeah, such a wealth of information. Can't thank all of you enough for coming on and sharing your expertise with our listeners so they're able to stay up to date on important topics facing the industry. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Our pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Bicycle Retail Radio. This podcast is designed specifically for the bicycle industry, dedicated to strengthening our retailers and cycling community. If it is your first episode, we urge you to take the time and listen to our past episodes.